At Maverick Public Relations, growing your influence is their specialty. NPR works with remarkable companies in the cannabis industry to deliver exceptional results. Experience big agency expertise and outstanding client service delivered by seasoned and knowledgeable experts. Connect with Maverick PR today and move your company to the next level. Visit them today at www.themaverickpr.com.
From a studio high above the clouds of the Okanagan Valley, this is the Cannabis Podcast. Exploring the world of Canadian cannabis culture, one toke at a time. Now, here's your host and bud tender, Gary Johnston.
And welcome back. Hard to believe. I don't know why I'm always surprised when we make it to the next episode. I guess just because I'm still here, alive and kicking, and we made it through this COVID-19. We did it. We made it to episode 45. Thanks for coming back. If this is your first visit, well, even more thanks for checking us out. Hopefully the cannabis information you will find in the next 30 minutes or so is going to be useful for you. This episode, I'm actually going to start off with a potpourri of a bunch of little items that I want to talk about. I finally have that conversation all lined up that I've been promising for a while now with longtime listener Chris Kobesko. He's from Michigan, and we're going to talk about growing some autoflowers indoors. And we're actually going to do a Cultivar Corner that has a bit of a retrospective look to it. I pulled out the penultimate jar from last year's crop the other day and thought, let's see if this still packs a punch. All of that and more is coming your way on episode 45 of the Cannabis Podcast. One of the things I absolutely love about doing the Cannabis Podcast is when I hear from somebody who's just discovered the program and is enjoying the ride. It thrills me to no end because, as you well know, I am passionate about this plant, and I love to share my knowledge and my enthusiasm for this plant. And it always excites me when somebody sends a note in to say that they have connected with it. And I got one of those this last week. Chris, who is a 25-year-old young professional from somewhere in Ontario, sent me a note. Thank you, Chris. Really appreciate the contact and glad you came on board. Chris asked the question about using a vaporizer. It had been suggested by a friend that perhaps instead of using edibles, which we've already talked about are very difficult to dose, maybe move to some smoking. And if you don't want to smoke, use a vaporizer. And the suggestion had been to microdose with a vaporizer to better control the effect. Well, if you spent any time listening to this podcast, you know that I'm a big believer in the true way to dose is through inhalation. You can absolutely control your dosage by taking just enough and then stopping. And of course, vaporizer is something that I've been suggesting for a while is a better way to inhale rather than smoke. At least you're not getting all the carcinogens from the smoke associated to that. So that was intriguing. I really appreciate the contact, Chris. I hope you continue to enjoy the podcast. And if anybody else has any concerns or thoughts like that, I'd love to hear about that as well. And then this last weekend, of course, was Mother's Day. And I was absolutely thrilled from another number of perspectives. Notice on Twitter, a number of moms who imbibe in cannabis were commenting that they had received some gifts of cannabis, either from their kids or from their partner. And it was one of those that I was really intrigued by. I actually got the message when we were out on the golf course the other day. And I have spoken about this couple before. They've been friends of mine for a few years now, new to cannabis. I was the one who introduced them to the concept and gave them some suggestions. They're loving the whole experience. The woman has had some issues with her lungs afterwards, so she has stopped inhaling and now deals strictly with edibles. Whereas the guy, he still enjoys it. He followed my advice of taking a vaporizer, and hopefully once these COVID days are over, we can get together and have another session. What intrigued me was she sent me this text, and here it is. Both of our daughters bought cannabis edibles, chocolate, for me for Mother's Day, where previously they would have bought wine, flowers, or regular chocolate. How times have changed. And that really expressed to me exactly that, how much times have changed. And I was thrilled to hear those kind of things. So there are some positives happening. The stigma is starting to go away. It's becoming more accepted, cannabis, in our society. And it's pretty thrilling. It's also pretty thrilling that I'm heading back to work in just a couple more days. In fact, when this podcast airs, already have worked a couple of days. Our grand opening is happening on this Saturday. Spirit Leaf in Kelowna is the place I'm going to be, and thoroughly looking forward to it. And that kind of is enough potpourri to get started today. How about we get to our interview? And Chris Kobesko is another one of those listeners of the Cannabis Podcast who contacted me a while ago. First got introduced to him through email. We had some discussions back and forth, and he had lots of ideas of things that he wanted to hear about on the show. And the most primary thing that he was talking about growing, giving people an opportunity to perhaps grow their own cannabis. So it took a bit of wrangling back and forth. Schedules change. After all, we are cannabis users and we have lives. But we finally managed to get it all together. And Chris joins me now in conversation. And in fact, we pick up the conversation just after I have connected with Chris on the phone.
Morning, this is Chris.
Good morning, Chris. This is Gary.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, and nice to finally connect.
Yes. and in the end of the virus, hopefully here, things are getting back to normal a little bit.
Things are starting to clear up a little bit, yeah. Where exactly what province are you in, Chris?
We are in Michigan. We are right. The Lake Superior is only about 10 miles north of us.
Oh, nice. And see, there you go. I made an assumption that you were somewhere in Canada, and I don't know why I got that assumption.
Well, you know, Canada is only really the shortest route 2 hours away.
How are you doing today, Chris? How are things in your world?
Good. We're doing well here. We even had a little bit of snow this morning, but
oh my,
May is starting to push through a little bit.
Yeah, it is. It is starting to feel like May, and here in BC, they are starting to loosen things up a little bit. How have things been for you in this COVID world?
We are so isolated in this neck of the woods, there's not much of a difference, I'll be honest with you.
And as we were preparing for this, one of the questions that Chris asked me, and which I appreciated the question, but I also appreciated the humor of it, considering the content of this podcast, which is all about cannabis. And Chris asked, is it okay if I'm a little high on the show?
And I did sample the product this morning.
And everybody knows the answer to that question because they all know that I'm going to be high during the content of this conversation. So let me start there, Chris. What have you imbibed with this morning to get yourself ready?
Oh, this is the Gorilla Glue 4. We're still on that.
This is the one that you sent me some pictures of. Beautiful looking flowers.
I did, yeah. Oh, she just took off. All of them did, and like I said, I'm not even a rookie yet.
Yeah.
So I thought I would want to share a little bit to say, don't get discouraged. Things happen, and
yeah.
It's not a difficult plant to grow.
Why don't we start there? What should be the first step of somebody who's now? I'm going to suggest, based on our conversations, I'm thinking that your growing is predominantly indoors, correct?
Yes, although I did try outdoors last year without great success.
Oh, you didn't? I had
that
really
was my
good
mistake.
Success. Yeah. What what do you think what was your mistake?
Oh, I believe just the weather. The plastic may not have been the correct type of plastic. Not able to move the right air through. Not enough control, in my opinion.
Okay. Yeah. See, we took completely the opposites in terms of our outdoor grow. And as you also know, or you may know, I got ripped off at the end of both of my seasons the last 2 years. But we take a completely approach. We put the plants outside and just let them go. We water them and let the sun work. And we did not add anything to them. And I'm still smoking some of the stuff that we harvested last year. And
I think it's the best way too.
Yeah, it's so vibrant and it doesn't take a lot of effort. So that's the outdoor side of things.
It doesn't, to let the cycle run its course.
Mm-hmm.
Let the sun be your timer. I agree.
Yeah, exactly. So now, of course, the disadvantage of that is if you're not using autoflowers, your harvest ends up being darn close to the middle of November up here, which is pretty late in the year.
It's true.
Yeah. So let's turn our attention to the indoor where you've had more experience, Chris, and give me a sense of if somebody's thinking of doing this, let's run through some steps. What are some of the things that they should be considering?
I was thinking about this and I thought, well, what do you need essentially to do a grow, to do 4 to 6 plants successfully? and have a harvest that could last you throughout the year.
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice?
I don't think there's any reason why one couldn't get between a half a pound and a pound off of 4 to 6 plants.
Okay. And you're using autoflowers?
We are. We're using autoflowers. We used 4 of them. I built a little area, no more than, I think it was a 4x6 room.
Okay.
In a room.
Yeah.
I used an HPS light that I found on Craigslist with a 1,000 watt bulb, and a ballast you can get used for $50, $100, and you don't need to, I know LEDs are great and they save a lot of money, but to get the same efficiency or to get the same product or yield, you'd really have to spend $800 or $900, I believe, on an LED to get what you would get out of a 1,000 watt HPS, which is just a street light, as you know.
Yeah, I'm getting that same sense that if you're going the LED route, it's going to cost you a lot of money to get started these days. Yeah.
So if you have your LED light and your ballast, I used 5-gallon containers that I got free from the local bakery.
Nice. Yeah.
They like big containers.
So each plant gets its own bucket in your grow?
Yes, yes. And one thing with autoflowers too is you don't have to transplant, or you should not transplant them. So once they're in their original container, let them grow, and that's it.
Okay, interesting. Because I haven't done autoflowers before, and kind of looking at doing those this year, although we may still do the outdoor route.
Oh, I think you'll enjoy them.
Yeah, the thing that we found, and you can give me some perspective since you have some experience with the autoflowers. Again, outdoors, when we grew our sativas and indicas, here in BC, I'm not sure what the rules are in Michigan, but in BC, the rules for growing cannabis, you can't grow 4 plants. But they have this odd stipulation that exists in no other province, and that's that those plants cannot be seen from a public space.
Same as Michigan, yes.
Okay, it's the same thing. So what happened with our sativas, which were in the back of our yard, and when they are below the shed, you can't see them from a public space. But lo and behold, those suckers got to be 13 feet tall last year.
Wow.
And they were visible from that public space. So how big, and this is what I'm really curious about moving into the autoflowers. Let's say you didn't control them. Would you still have the situation that they could grow that high, or by the very nature of adding the ruderalis into them, it keeps them a little bit more of a lower profile? Would they? A
little lower profile, I believe. Yeah, 2 to 4 feet seems to be about right. Now they have the super autos. They say that get 4 to 6 feet, which would be interesting to try. They're just very manageable to move in and out of a tent, to water, to feed. And they are solid plants. Once they start flowering, they really stack quickly.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. The outdoor stuff that we grew, the flowers develop so slowly. That I would take a picture and then I would try to compare that picture. I think, well, I think there's some growth there. I'm pretty sure there's some growth there. Can you see any? How long have you been doing your indoor growth?
Oh, I just started just last year, and I thought to myself, I made all these mistakes. What can I change? I got simpler, and things started to happen better.
And isn't that something we always should learn? Is simpler is often better.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Isn't it? I also use for soil, I use cocoa coir, which is just the coconut husks.
Okay.
It's very forgiving. If I make a mistake, it can be flushed quickly.
Nice.
I also tend to keep our water is always at a pH level of about 7 here. And they like about 6.7 to 7, they say. I think that's important. So, I do that. I also let my water sit for 3 or 4 days to get the chlorine out, because chlorine does affect them pretty drastically versus photos I found.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard that
before. They're a little
too.
sensitive.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. That's something that we haven't considered in our watering our outdoor plants. Maybe we're going to have to start thinking about that.
And I keep my nutrition very simple with them. I use one nutrient for veg and one for flower.
Okay.
Both organic, and both are top dressers. So that makes it a little easier too. You don't have to measure really anything. You just take, 2 tablespoons of the organic nutrient and sprinkle it on the soil, mix it in with your fingers a little bit.
Yeah.
And then water as you will. And every 2 to 3 weeks, you just recharge it.
Oh, nice.
You couldn't make a mistake. It's just simple The plants take it in slowly. You can't burn them.
Yeah.
So somebody we want to consider.
And because they're auto flowers, you're not worrying about any 12-hour light cycles that come up.
That's correct. Yes, it's so simple. And, I know some people who use even a 24-24. They don't even worry about light leaks. They just have them in the corner of their room with the light on top of them. And so that makes it a little easier. You don't have to worry about things like, turning that plant into a hermaphrodite or re-vegging it. Or So you don't have to be perfect when you build a little structure or use a tent.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't have to buy the best tent. So it makes it a little bit simpler. They're ready pretty quickly too. 60 days, they say. I think more 90 days.
Okay. Yeah, that's the thing I'm going to be really curious about from the outdoor perspective is when those flowers start to show up, because they're about to go into the ground. They've been in the greenhouse for a bit now, and probably going to go in the next week or two. And as I've mentioned before, that's probably the last thing I'm going to say about my outdoor growth this year. I don't want to have anybody to have any. Well, I'm going to continue to grow them, but I'm not going to talk about them on the podcast because I don't want to entice anybody to come and take my crop again this year.
So, I mean, and when they're done, it seems to me, I just look for the trichomes. I got a little jeweler's rouge, and
excellent.
Some people say, when you have 80% cloudy or 20% amber trichomes, you're ready to go. I think it's a preference as long as they're at least 50-80% cloudy.
I wholeheartedly agree. From the way that I perceive it and what my experience, and I've been doing this for 2 years now, so I'm not a long-term grower either. But in looking at the trichomes, for me, almost every time that I got to a harvest, I was looking at about, I would probably say 80% cloudy, so fully cloudy.
Yes.
Very little clear and the occasional amber. And that's one of the reasons why some of our product got left or got stolen, because I wanted to leave it a little longer. I wanted to do an experiment, a little bit more go amber to see what the effects would be. But the bastard stole it on me and I never got that chance to see it.
What's nice too about things like autoflowers is you can selective harvest as well. So if they're almost done or one branch is looking well, you can harvest that early. The plant continues to grow.
Okay, nice. And then that was the other thing that I'm curious about, Chris, is so you've done the grow, the plant's ready, you've checked the trichomes, you've got 80% milky and 20% amber. You're looking good. What process do you go through harvesting? Do you take the whole plant or do you take branches as you just indicated?
I take the branches individually, and then I will hang them in my little 4x6 room with a fan going lightly on them and temperature control. I've got to say one thing. There's an instrument I use. It made it so much easier, called an ink bird. And an ink bird, what it does is it keeps that temperature where you set it. You plug it into a heater and an extraction fan, and that temperature will stay 72, 74, whatever you like.
Oh, that's a good idea.
That makes a big difference.
Yeah, that's one area where we have perhaps not done as good of a job. The area we use for drying is a specific area in our house that is not necessarily able to be controlled from a temperature perspective, and I think some of our harvest suffered a little bit from that.
And then I will I dried for 10 days until the branches would crack when I bent them when they were
that little snap as you give it a little click. Yeah. That's a good idea.
And I find curing, I wasn't going to cure for long, but I cured for like 30 days, and what a difference.
Yeah, so curing
it's like aging wine.
Yeah, exactly. An airtight jar, and then you were
really
burping them every day?
Mm-hmm. Your buds come together, they harden up, they tighten up. Your trichomes seem to even get almost thicker.
Yeah, it's a fascinating process. The curing.
It is really, isn't it? It is. It's almost I'm bored when I don't have that to do now. I almost hated harvesting. I want to, I plan on growing soon, but
yeah, that's a good
it's
point.
almost as fun as smoking it, It is. It's really fun.
You're right. You lose that. Well, okay, I got to do the burp, and with the jars I had, it was a fairly significant process that didn't go through.
Yes, it is every day. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really do find that it really does make the nugs really nice and tight and just nug them up, I guess, is the whole purpose.
It really does. Yes. You're not disappointed. At first, they might be a little loose looking, but like you say, give them the time and they'll come around.
Yeah, that's very cool. So now you sent me some pictures of your Gorilla Glue 4 that you're currently smoking and enjoying.
Mm-hmm.
Has that been the favorite strain that you've tried so far, or have there been others?
I tried one like 3 years ago called El Chapo.
Okay, yeah.
And that was just a real heavy hitter, long laster, good tasting. I can't find it anymore though.
Oh, that's too bad.
But I do. Gorilla Glue 4 is my go-to.
And if memory serves me correct, Gorilla Glue is down the indica line, is it not, in terms of its heritage?
It is. I believe it's 50-50.
Yeah. And that, I think, was one of Willie Nelson's strains that he liked.
Oh, yes. I think I got it from ilovesmokingmarijuana.com is where I ordered it from. Same as you order, I believe, from sometimes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, that's very cool.
Great genetics.
It's fascinating to me that we're at this stage, and I don't know if it's the same down in Michigan, but as you know here, cannabis was declared an essential service in these COVID times. All of our cannabis stores are still open and exercising, social distancing and all of those kind of things.
Yeah, same here. Glad to hear too. Yes.
Yeah, and it's just so. How long has legalization occurred in your state?
Medical was in 2008 and recreational was in 2018.
And do you think your federal government is ever going to catch up with all the states?
I think they're a little more progressive than most. We have great licensing categories here. For less than $15,000, you can grow 150 plants and have a storefront to sell.
Oh, wow.
So, the licenses are just very inexpensive, and people get together with 3 or 4 people and make it happen. So they're very inexpensive here.
Interesting.
It's not hard to set up a shop at all.
I'm going to take a step back now as well, Chris, and get a sense of how long have you been using cannabis? How long have you been involved in this?
I did my experimentation in high school and college, but I think I wish I would have known about the effects a little bit, the positive effects a little earlier, instead of even looking at alcohol and at college and those kind of issues. And
okay.
I wish it was legal 20 or 30 years ago. But I think 3 or 4 years ago, a little more consistently, just to relax after work and deal with a little anxiety or depression and focus. It's a wonderful medicine.
Truly is. It is a wonderful plant. It just astounds me that there's still so much of our world that considers it to be this evil plant that is destroying our world, and yet in fact it's doing the exact opposite.
I agree with you. Many still do up here.
Yeah.
But they're changing.
Stigma is a big thing for me, and it always will
be.
I guess it is. It is horrible. And then you do a flush of the growing medium before you finish up, right?
I do. I did a 2-week flush, watering every day, a good gallon or 2 of runoff. And then they started to change just like the leaves in the fall, just beautiful. And then I knew they were close.
Nice. And so you were saying you were getting about a 60 to 90 day in terms of from the plant growing to the time you had the flower off of that. And then you were curing for another 30 days, you said? Something like that?
Yes. I think, 95 days to really flower the plant, or to veg and flower. 95 days from seed to harvest would be about right. And then I dried for 10 very gently, and I cured for 30. And boy, I got to say, pleased.
Nice.
Pleased. And and a lot of it may have been just luck, but I did my research, and anybody can pull a nice crop, I believe, for $300 or $400 in own electricity and $100 in equipment or two, and you'll make your money back.
Well, we'll take that as a bit of a challenge to those who are considering to do some growing this year. And if you decide you want to do it yourself, as Chris says, it's something that can be done. It's not like you have to set up one of those. Back in the day when grow houses were around every city in town, and you had the smell permeating out of them, and the houses were destroyed because there were so many plants growing in them. Those days are gone with the type of grow you're talking about, right?
Aren't they? Oh, it's just so clean now. Even without filters, I extract it right out a window.
Okay.
No issues with bugs really, but there's just neem oil to spray on the plants if you get any kind of issues, which usually takes care of them pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And autoflowers, they say, are a little more immune. to
Nice.
pests. I didn't know about that either. So
Even better.
for outdoor.
Yeah, and we've been lucky so far. We haven't had any issues with pests. And in fact, my wife looks at it the other way. She considers that the cannabis plants are taking the pests away from a lot of the other plants that are in her garden. And I guess the terpenes are strong enough that they're just sending everybody away. I don't know.
Yes, yeah. They don't seem to bother them outside. They seem to almost, be more repellent outside to bugs than they are inside.
Yeah, very interesting. Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Well, excellent. I am so glad that we pursued this, Chris, and we both
had a
managed
good time.
to get it together and go through this discussion. And chances are I'll give you another call and see how things are going with your crop as it's going. What I would like to finish up with, as I typically do, is my hot seat questions. They're not difficult at all. And in fact, I think you have all the capabilities of answering all of them. So what would be your favorite strain or cultivar?
I'd have to say El Chapo still.
That's still it, eh? Yeah, that
I will
sounded pretty
find it.
nice. And if you're consuming, is it joints or vaporizer?
Water bong.
Water bong. Now there's one I haven't used
That's
for
what
a
we do in
while.
Michigan.
That's my. I don't think my lungs can take that big water bong hit anymore.
I'm going to change soon, I think.
So you're still doing it. You're still honking on the bong.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's definitely one of the best way to get a really big hit and a nice high.
It is. It really is. Big
Yeah.
speaker bong. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The funny thing is, I don't even have a bong anymore.
You might want to reconsider.
Well, I'm starting to think that. I'm hearing from a lot of people that maybe, because let's be honest, I do use a vaporizer most of the time.
Yeah, they're nice. They're wonderful.
But I also smoke a joint, if I'm, just
Yeah, I do too
quick.
once in a while.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But you're intriguing me. I may have to go back and pick up a little bong and just get back into that magic. Because that used to be my favorite way of smoking all the time.
Yeah, it is. It is nice.
Now, let's stop on there because I just read something the other day. Because the issue that I always had with the bong, and I'm sure you do as well, is that stinky bong water that gets down in the bottom of it. Because I, as a lazy cannabis smoker back in the day, would not change that water on a frequent basis. I was reading a story the other day that said if you change your bong water after every use, you won't get into that. Do you do that, or do you let it sit for a bit?
I do it. I do it every other day, but I use alcohol, 91%, and rock salt.
Yeah, I've heard that
and I
too.
just shake it up really good, and it cleans it in like 20 seconds. It's spotless.
Yeah, that's a really good cleaning agent, the
Super
isopropyl,
easy.
and adding the rock salt for the
Yes.
corrosion in it. That's a really
Save
good
you
idea.
time.
Excellent. Okay, so we know it's joints or vape, and your favorite munchie.
I'd have to say ice cream or yogurt with a little jelly has been my favorite lately.
Man, after my
A little
own
bit of
heart.
sweet. Uh-huh.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way.
So whatever I can get my hands on.
And edibles or flour?
I do a little of both. I make a lot of canna butter with the sweet or with the sugar leaf that I have,
Okay, good.
but mainly flour.
Mm-hmm. And as an aside there, what's your experience with edibles? Do they affect you in a similar way, and do you enjoy the high of the edibles?
They a little bit different. Not as much as the flour would get me,
Okay.
but a little bit more longer lasting, and a little bit more of that body sensation.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
I like
absolutely.
them. I do. I enjoy them.
Good. And then I got a couple of other questions, and these involve, and I'm fascinated as we move across our various countries, whether it's Canada or the U.S., there's just slightly different terminology across the country. So there's a couple of things that I'm curious about what terminology you might use in Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
What do you call a running joint when it starts to run away on you in terms of the paper burning up the side?
I've heard it called a white rabbit.
Okay, now that's interesting. Here it's called a canoe.
Yes. Oh, of course, sure.
Yeah,
Makes sense.
the shape of the canoe. So white rabbit, that's a new one. I like that. And then the other one I'm really curious about is because I've noticed in my time in sales that this one has different terminology right across the country. And that is involving what we would typically in BC call an eighth. If you were going to buy that in Michigan, what would you call it?
See, we would call it an eighth as well, an eighth.
Okay, yeah, that's good. The most amusing one that I've talked about on the show many times is a half quarter. Like what the heck is a half quarter? And then,
we also, some people also, do the 7.5 grams too, they'll do 7.5s.
okay.
Interesting.
Okay. Yeah. And then in Quebec, it's logically called a 3.5.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
That makes sense because it is the 3.5. Interesting. It's a fascinating plant. It's a fascinating culture. And I have found, without a doubt, the people involved in cannabis are just really nice people. And I think we've proved that fact again today, Chris.
I agree with you. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for having a chat with me and giving us some idea of what can happen from growing those autoflowers indoors. Any plans for the rest of your day?
Not a lot today. I'm off today. I might go back and clean up the grow room a little, get it ready for numbers 3.
Ah, nice. Well, I look forward to hearing about how that goes, Chris, and you enjoy the rest of your day. And thanks so much for being on the Cannabis Podcast.
Thanks for having me. Have a great day.
Are you ready for liftoff? Don't miss Canada's #1 cannabis conference and trade show, Lift & Co Expo, coming this May 12 to 15 to Metro Toronto Convention Centre. Level up your industry intel at the Lift Cannabis Business Conference. Connect with movers and shakers from across the cannabis industry and preview new products and services from 250-plus exhibitors. Plus, everyone loves Lift & Co Expo's prizes, live music, and more. Visit liftexpo.ca for tickets. That's liftexpo.ca.
THC, CBD, terpene profiles, what's in me? Oh, please explain to me. Cultivar Corner, Cultivar Corner, oh yeah. Cultivar Corner, please explain this stuff to me.
We're taking a bit of an odd turn on Cultivar Corner today, primarily for the reason that I wanted to use the word penultimate. If you ask my wife, she'll tell you that's one of my favorite words. I use it every opportunity there is when I am doing the second to last thing. So I today opened up my penultimate jar of homegrown from last year. There's only one left. And I thought this would be an interesting thing to do a Cultivar Corner on, to see not only is it still kind of fresh and has a really nice fruity bouquet, so there's still enough terpenes there to give it a fair amount of smell. Now this is one of the jars. It's pretty nuggy. The nugs tightened right up through the curing that we did last year. And let me just pull out the jeweler's loop and see if we can take a peek at the trichomes that have, oh my goodness sakes. Oh, I'm very impressed. These little puppies are just full of nice milky trichomes. There's a little spattering of some amber. Oh, so I suspect that when let me just pop some into the vaporizer for the quickest attack to see what it's going to do. My lowly mighty, which I must say is reaching the end of its days. I've mentioned before in the podcast, I seem to be hard on vaporizers. I've gone through two volcanoes, which are the granddaddy and the most durable. I've buried 2 of them. And it looks like I'm soon to be burying my mighty. But for the purpose of getting a quick little buzz going, I'm just grinding up in my hands, so it's still moist enough that it's not crumbling, not like some of the stuff that I have gotten that was packaged back in 2018. So this was from December of 2019. That's when this stuff came out of the jars and went into a packaging after the curing process. So it's been a few months. I'm able to just crumble it in my fingers, but it takes a bit of work. It's not crumbling into dust, so to get it to the stage where it's good for the vaporizer is taking a little effort. We are about ready to give Ethel Street Haze Vintage 2019 a taste and see, and based on those trichomes that I was looking at, I think it's still going to have a pretty good kick. The vaporizer is up to temperature for Ethel Street Haze. It's still got some taste. Not harsh. So while I'm sure there has been some CBN production as the THC degrades, I don't think it has been substantial because it's not really harsh. Not not having this dying urge to cough. Now, I also have to remind you that sometimes that is due to the temperature you're using in your vaporizer. If you run it a little too hot, you can cough over some of the herb that you inhale. Yeah. Just a hint of a fruity flavor to it. Almost like somebody added some vanilla or something to it. And with hit number 3, and here come the happy eyes. I'm pretty happy. Not only is this this may be the penultimate jar of the homegrown, but it seems to be just as strong as the stuff that first came out after we finished the harvest last year. So I'm happy. That's a good sign. And then I've got 1 more ounce before we come to the time where I have no more homegrown in between the time we start our plantation this year. So if you're in Canada, with the exception of Quebec and Manitoba, you can grow 4 cannabis plants. And if you want to have some fun doing it, experience the joy of the bounty of growing stuff yourself and save a bit of money in the process, I encourage you to do so. You can get seeds in a lot of different outlets now. In fact, you can get seeds at a lot of the government stores, or the private government regulated stores are now selling seeds. The licensed producers have finally realized that there is a market for that. So take a look around at that and take advantage of that. If you don't want to start with 4, well, just grow 2. Remember, of course, in BC, you have to have a space in your yard that is not visible from a public space without use of any kind of other device, meaning they can't use a telescope or a periscope to look at it. But I don't know why a submarine would be out there anyways. Okay, clearly I'm digressing. I think it's time to stop now. This has had the effect I was wondering if it did. It does. So there you go. This has been in the cupboard for since last December, and it still packs a pretty good punch. And once again, we did it. Only this time we completed episode 45. I hope you found some of that useful. If you ever have any suggestions of what you think I should talk about or somebody that I should interview, please send a note to info@cannabispodcast.com. I have had a suggestion, actually, from somebody that we all know, my son Ian, the writer and composer of the Cultivar Corner jingle, and soon maybe something else. We'll see. But Ian had a suggestion that he has always wondered about the humidity packs that you're getting in your cannabis these days. So I think I'm going to call up him in the next episode, and we'll have a chat about those humidity packs and how they impact either positively or negatively your cannabis. That wraps it up for episode 45 of the Cannabis Podcast.
From the cannabis-infused studio, high above the Okanagan Valley, this was the Cannabis Podcast.